Hello there everyone, welcome back to another episode of the In Out Crowd. Even though we're able to go out and about a little bit more, tonight we are still staying in, and as always we are of course very much out. We have got quite a bit of a jam-packed episode on for you this evening, and we are going to be having a wee callback to a previous podcast episode with the amazing Amazon Lethe, and we are going to be having a little look at the filmed interview that we did with her, what seems like about a million years ago now, but it was actually just a few months ago during the summer. We're also going to be having a wee chat about Trans Awareness Week, the Trans Day of Remembrance, which is coming up this Saturday, and something that we've kind of coined as a bit of a trans celebration week. Well, of course, that is every single week. I think it's especially important on this week of trans awareness to also uplift and celebrate the amazing T in the LGB. But to start us off, we're going to be having a little look through all of the fabulous, amazing news that the LGBTQ plus community has been bringing out over the past week. And we're going to be doing that come rain or shine in our weather girl.
It's raining men! Hallelujah! It's raining men!
So, in current news, not related to the LGBTQ plus community, but my next door neighbour's washing machine is running at full pelt. So, apologies if it sounds like there's some queer hurricane that's coming over the Atlantic. It's not. It's just number 85 is putting on a cold wash. But first of all, we have got a fabulous rainbow that is, of course, over the skies, as it always is, but especially this week, as a new app has launched for genderless haircuts on demand. The app is called Do, spelt D with 3 zeros after it, and it is created by the fabulous Jess Palfrey, who has created their own mobile hairdressing salon to enable her to cut hair anywhere. This hairdresser has created this app to promote inclusivity by providing genderless haircuts on demand. Jess Palfrey, as I'd mentioned, is named. The app is named Do, and the 27-year-old launched this Bristol-based business as she felt that traditional hairdressers and barbershops were not being inclusive or affordable enough. The BBC has reported on their LGBT news little tab where they did an interview with them where she said we should just be cutting hair for hair, not cutting hair because of people's gender. The reason she created the app, she said, was to help people. She claims, I'm trying to pull the hair industry into a new generation and make them realise that not all women have long hair and not all men have short hair. Jess's route into the trade began after a quote-unquote traumatic experience at military school when all of her hair was shaven off. Bless. Despite being set for a career in the army, she began training to be a hairdresser alongside her university degree. After returning to the UK, Jess started cutting hair in people's gardens between COVID-19 lockdowns and decided to create a business out of it. Thankfully, after some investment from family and friends and a successful crowdfunding campaign, she has raised enough funds to create her app, and she now has 16 stylists signed up and a shop in Bedminster who has given themselves the job title of Inclusive Haircutter. Some of her company members have said, I've had experiences of being turned away from barbershops. As a non-binary person, I was told we don't cut women's hair in barbershops, and I'm not a woman. This was said by Kane Sainsbury, who is one of the members of staff working under Jess. And Kane has said that they give their clients the freedom to choose the style that they want, but specialises in mullets, weird haircuts, and shaggy 70s do's. That sounds like I need to get on a train to Bristol ASAP. And there are plans to launch Do in 5 other cities, Jess said, which sounds absolutely fantastic. And of course, we're always here for a fantastic queer-owned business, and we wish Jess and the rest of their staff the best of luck as they move forward with Do. Next up on our weather front tonight, we have got a kind of stormy front brewing in from Italy way, as the Italian Senate approves law banning sexist and discriminatory adverts, which of course should sound like that is magnificent sunshine, but unfortunately some far-right politicians are furious over this decree, as that also covers gay people, groups of varying ethnicities and disabled people. So this came as last week. This law, which forms part of a transport and infrastructure decree, has banned adverts on streets and all forms of transport that are seen to be demeaning to women and perpetuate gender stereotypes, as well as adverts that are considered harmful to civil and political rights or containing discriminatory messages against gay people, ethnic and religious groups, or people with disabilities. And that wording was written by theguardian.com. Thank you very much. There's no wee sunglasses there. So one of the senators with the far-right Brothers of Italy, Lucio Milan, has said that the banning of adverts that discriminate against people based on their gender identity is an ideological norm aimed at limiting freedom of expression, and it's a measure that has been introduced treacherously. Andrea Bertoli, another senator with Brothers of Italy, said that this shameful law has been reproduced. It's shameful that this law has been reproduced in a transport decree. What's interesting is that Luisa Rizzitelli, who is a women's rights activist, has also pointed out that there's many that the Pro Vita Association, who is an anti-abortion group, has also attacked the passing of this bill. But Louisa has said that from working in women's rights for most of her career, she has said that this will be a great step forward in banning sexist publicity, which she claims is quote unquote everywhere across Italy. For example, there was an outcry in January over a street billboard in a town in Puglia depicting a woman dressed as a French maid offering cleaning services free for a month, and quite often food and beverage adverts are featuring only women wearing only their underwear. And in 2017, the jewellery chain Pandora was forced to scrap a pre-Christmas series of ads asking if women would prefer an iron, pyjamas, an apron, or a bracelet as a gift. And Rizzitelli has said that all the women's associations have been trying for years to stop this, and this law could hopefully help bring about a cultural change too. So that was an awful lot of information, not only for our Bristol-based fantastic queer community's new Do app, but also from over Italy way. So we think that there's quite a lot to unpack there, particularly around this week being the week of trans awareness. So I'm going to open up to my fellows who are here with me in the Out Crowd for a bit of an LGBT Q&A. So let's start with our rainbow story that we had at the very start about Bristol. So it was an app that was looking to try and be more inclusive and affordable for the queer community. Talking about haircuts, look at this little flick that I've got going on up here. Maybe I need to do a wee shout. Eleanor, how do we feel about not only a queer business being able to thrive post-pandemic, but also the kind of work that they're aiming to do? How do you feel?
Yeah, it's awesome. Putting it simply. I mean, it's quite funny. Since the pandemic started, my partner's hair has got shorter and mine's just continued to get longer. We're getting as far away from each other as possible. But like my partner's often taken as a woman in a barber's or whatever, and they always try and get her to pay more. And she's like, my hair's short. So yeah, I think there's this idea that you don't have this whole list of women's cuts and men's cuts or whatever. I think is a really, really good idea.
Absolutely. There is a fantastic poet who's a non-binary poet called Gray. Oh, it's blanking me now, but they did a fantastic poem that was about getting their hair cut at a barber's and kind of going through the kind of really difficult questions and sometimes quite invasive questions that are asked. And the kind of the end line was, I just want you to cut my effing hair. Love swearing here at the Out Crowd, but of course this is good on YouTube, so I'm trying to be family friendly for a change. And I think that it's really interesting how there is such a big difference between going into a salon versus going into a barber's, and how it is actually still an issue even in the UK, which a lot of folks wouldn't think that. Tommy, what's your kind of response to Do?
I think it's fabulous. I mean, you've got to love LGBT welcoming space, don't you? And particularly a hairdresser. We've got to be looking solid for a wee what's it called? Visual representation of who we are. So no, that's great. I think more queer businesses, woohoo, the better.
Absolutely.
I think.
it was that end part about the mullets, the weird haircuts, and the shaggy 70s style that I was like, sign me up from now until 40 years from now. Give me that every time.
Sorry, were mullets know what we had last year though? After when we couldn't go to the hairdressing, couldn't get a haircut, and we got all experimental with like hair with our scissors, or was that just me?
So this is the thing, right? On the Raining Them, I was giving myself sass for being, for having that kind of mullet bowl cut, thinking, oh my goodness, that's immortalised in YouTube forever to come. However, it now seems to be coming back in when we can actually go to the hairdressers again. So I'm thinking maybe COVID-19, Alex, maybe they were right on the money. I don't know.
That's it. Aye, yeah. You were ahead of your time, Brenda.
I think so. But it's interesting, Tommy, what you said about that visual representation of who we are, because we've talked about this a couple of times in podcasts and in interviews, that quite often it is, I certainly feel that I sort of wear my queerness like quite out there. Any chance for a rainbow sock, I'm sticking it on. There we go, Eleanor's got the rainbow, wrist strap on their watch. It's kind of these things that it doesn't seem like a big deal, and in the grand scheme of things, it's probably not, but it's just that little thing, like Tommy, when you've got your fresh new perm, or you've got your wee blonde tips, and you've got the spikes up, you just feel like it's a bit of an armour, like you can take on the world.
Yeah, absolutely. When I used to wear my hair like dead spiky, I did feel like a bit of an armor. Yeah, it was kind of like you're getting like ready for the world, and it's funny because I used to get all the time, like when if you haven't seen me before, when I'm not wearing a hat like I am tonight because I haven't bothered to do my hair, it used to be like dead spiky up the front. It was pretty big. It was probably about that big, possibly, all across up here. So it was like a wee crown. I used to think, let's call that a wee crown, and the reigning queen. Thank you. But basically, I used to get like shout with it all the time because people used to shout like Jedward as I was like walking down the street. But which I could take. But it is that thing about like people always used to say to me like, would it not just be easier for you just to like quieten it down and just like have your hair like in a side parting, just kind of gently. I was like, oh my goodness, really? But yeah, no, absolutely. It's like got to get your what's the word I'm looking for? So it's the end of a long day. It's like your expression. You've got to express yourself. As I believe the mighty Madonna once said.
And it was, I thought you were going to burst into song there for a minute, Tommy. I thought you were going to give us a whole chorus.
We're going to get a YouTube strike against us, Alex.
Oh, of course, yes. So everyone go on to, use those clues and guess the Madonna song in the comments down below, yes. So unfortunately, something not quite as happy-go-lucky as fancy queer hairdos, talking about this kind of like, banning sexist and discriminatory adverts. That seems like a good thing. No, why in the wake of kind of post-COVID or even beforehand, these kind of things seem to be an outcry. And I think particularly in the sort of week of trans awareness, trans remembrance coming up, and as I like to call it, trans celebration, why this still seems to be such an issue. Eleanor, do you have a kind of perspective, being a woman on the panel, unlike me and Tommy?
I just think it's ludicrous. The thing is, I can perfectly picture this advert that you were saying about with the woman very scantily clad trying to advertise things, and I understand that whole thing of sex sells, like it works. But I also think lots of other things sell. And you see now, certainly in countries like the UK, for example, you're seeing more and more and more adverts that are including more and more diverse people. I work with children a lot, and a lot of children now in their TV programs, for example, see like LGBTQ plus people and relationships, and it means that it doesn't like faze them. And I mean, we have spoken many, many times about the media representation, but that crosses into adverts too. If you're seeing it, and if I were to see a company clearly supporting LGBTQ plus rights, I'm probably more likely to buy the product, as long as it's not, good old pink washing, rainbow washing. But I think I've got a pretty good nose for that, so yeah.
And just in case anyone, like my dad, is watching, pink washing is not when you accidentally put a red sock in with your whites. That's something different, okay? Just so that we're all clear, because, yeah. Tommy, what about yourself? Do you have any kind of thoughts, opinions, particularly in the wake of some fun, interesting, don't want to give too much away, but perhaps some new work on coming down the line for the queer community, but I don't want to give anything away. Have you been thinking about these kind of issues? And yeah, what's your kind of response to this kind of stuff?
Well, I'm now thinking like, which one are you? Which one are you?
No, which one? Doesn't matter.
So don't say the wrong one, but yeah, maybe you could tell me in the chat. But yeah, I feel the same. It's like, oh, where to start? I think that I've also got, I think, a good eye as well for that now, for like sniffing out when you've got like your M&S and all that kind of lot, when they've got their like, their LGBT, what was it? I can't remember what LGBT or something.
Oh, the BLG, the bacon, lettuce, tomato.
Aye, with a wee side of gay on the side. Like, was that what the G was for? I think so. But yeah, it was quite, like those kind of things just feel a bit like a little bit unsavory, because you're kind of like, is that though? Like, are you actually committing to like, give solidarity to your LGBT kind of workers and all of that behind the scenes? And are you actually also funding like people who are kind of out to kind of take our rights away from us and all those kind of things, because it's a complicated place, isn't it, where people invest their money or what they put their kind of time and energy into. So yeah, so I think I would love to see more inclusive advertising that actually is not problematic advertising, that actually ultimately behind it there's kind of complicated stuff going on. I think also, with another hat on, I'm also co-chair of Dundee Pride, and it's something that we have to look at quite often, is about how do you, where do you want to go in terms of sponsorship, in terms of, because it's a really expensive thing to put on a big massive Pride event, as I'm sure you can imagine, like hugely expensive, but ultimately nobody really wants to pay for that, because everyone wants to be a free event, because so that actually it's not exclusive in that way, but it's open to everyone. But ultimately, how do you pay for something like that? So quite often it's about sponsorship, and it's something we have to look at about, like, who are these people that could sponsor kind of what we do, that also has a genuine commitment to LGBT rights, and that it's not kind of jumping on a bandwagon and not kind of doing it just to kind of look good, but it's like walking the walk and talking the talk. Has to be like incongruence, don't they, really?
Absolutely.
Look at me using congruence. Oh.
Congruence, I know. Look at all the big words, end of the day, my foot. Listen to that. Well, someone who is absolutely committed to the inclusivity and really making sure that the LGBTQ plus, what was it that Drew used? Inclusion, not acceptance, and not, but inclusion, because we're here and quite literally queer, is the fantastic, amazing Amazon Letty. So Amazon was someone who we had interviewed for a podcast quite a few months ago now, back when my hair was still pink, but would have blended into this background, so maybe it's better that it's blue now. But we're going to have a wee sneak peek into one of the other interviews that we did with Amazon, that was more kind of focused on her work as a queer activist, as a queer sports activist, and just so many other fantastic things that she does. So we are going to be taking a wee deep dive into the current affairs that Amazon is related to, or as we call it here, our Raisin Liaisons. On the In-Out Crowd, we are super pleased and so thrilled to be joined by the fabulous Amazon Letty. So can you just start us off then, Amazon? Who are you? What do you do for your job? Maybe a little fun fact about yourself, in case anyone's not heard of all the fabulous work that you do.
Sure. I always think when people ask me, who are you? And I just think, Lady of Leisure, that's who I am. My pronouns are she and her. I'm a global LGBTQ advocate. I'm an athlete. I'm a keynote speaker. I'm a published author. And I'm the only Asian LGBTQ athlete to simultaneously hold 6 ambassador roles in sports in different regions of the world. And they include most recently Copenhagen 2021, that's happening in August, and Pride House, Birmingham and the Federation, Gay Games, Stonewall UK, Athlete Ally, and Vietnam Relief Services.
Fantastic. That sounds amazing. Great CV there. Good. And then my next thing was, I was wondering if you could explain a little bit more about what you do as an LGBTQ plus advocate.
Sure. So, all the work centers around my sports work. I've been an athlete all my life, a competitive athlete, a trainer to Olympians, a health and fitness writer, a health and fitness published author. So it's, how do we use this platform of sports to champion equality? So all the work that I do is, looking through the lens of sports to champion equality, because I think particularly in more hostile situations, or when you're speaking to communities that are anti-LGBTQ, where do you find the sweet spot in terms of, having this conversation? And, I found it's through sports. So, so much of my work now is advising governments all around the world around how we look through the lens of sports to champion equality. And I advise, Fortune 500 companies. I speak to sports federations, athletes, sports organizations, the media about this conversation, and then with a specific lens around being Asian and LGBTQ in sports and life, and the challenges and barriers that we face, because so rarely do we hear our stories, and so rarely do people hear from an Asian LGBTQ person.
That's incredible. Yeah, something that I just kind of, I just wanted to ask, I don't think it was in the pre-approved questions, but something that's came to mind is that certainly here in the UK, and I know in a lot of places, sport is very sort of binary, particularly, in schools, it's kind of like in the UK, it's like the boys do football, the girls do gymnastics or dance or something. How do you find working with equality through the lens of sports, as you were talking about? Do you find that there is some challenges kind of centered around being LGBTQ plus with sports kind of being the driver?
I think for me, there are different multiple challenges. And yes, sport has always had very rigid gender norms. Girls play this kind of sports, boys play this kind of sports. Where do trans and non-binary people fit in sports? Because, we haven't thought of that. Sports wasn't designed for, all the spectrums of the rainbow. Sport necessarily hasn't been designed for women or people of color. I think, where my greatest challenge stems is having the conversation around being Asian in sports, and then Asian LGBTQ in sports. I mean, we look at Tokyo 2021. We've never seen so many out athletes. I mean, Tom Daley just won gold. I mean, you have, so many out athletes, but only 2 of that list are from the Asian community. One from the Philippines and one from India. So it says so much about being Asian and LGBTQ. I mean, when you look at all the Western countries, I mean, the UK is sent 374, I think, athletes to Tokyo. Only 7 are Asian. The US sent over 500, I think around like only 10 are Asian, but we're the most populous community in the world, but we're not seen in sport. So it's having that I have very challenging conversations where we're just so invisible in sports, and how do we make ourselves visible? And then on top of that, why are there so few Asian LGBTQ athletes in sports, and the challenges and barriers that we have there? But if we have no Asians in sports, I can't pop out of a hat an Asian LGBTQ person if there are no Asian people in sports, or if there's like one Asian person in that team and we absolutely know they're straight and they've told us, we can't suddenly turn them gay overnight to have that representation. So it's those challenges. So I have different challenges from other athlete activists in the community. And we see those challenges manifesting through Tokyo Olympics of how Asian people are spoke about in sports. And I think Naomi Osaka is a perfect example, because, the Australian newspaper, a journalist there said she wasn't Japanese enough to hold the torch to light. Well, she's Japanese, she's biracial. Japan chose her, which says so much for Japan choosing a biracial athlete. They could have chosen anyone, but they chose her. So there are all these kind of multiple factors of the challenges that I have and the reasons why I'm an advocate, because this is a lived experience for me, because I've been through it as an Asian LGBTQ athlete.
Yeah, hearing the statistics like that really puts it into perspective out of how many athletes that are sent and how many are actually Asian. And yeah, even then the statistics of the possibility of any of them being LGBTQ plus is obviously reduced as well in comparison. So yeah, thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, because we don't think about it until those stats are put in our face, and we think, well, not one Western country sent an Asian LGBTQ athlete to the Olympics, and that says so much of what's going on as the reasons why there are only two, one from India and one from the Philippines.
Right on the inner. And that was the amazing Amazon Lethe. So if you'd like to hear more about what she had to say in that fantastic interview, as mentioned before, we do, of course, have a podcast that you can go and have a wee listen to, which is available on Apple Podcasts, and it is also available on our website as well. But given all of the things that we've talked about tonight, either with Amazon about visibility and representation, and of course everything that we talked about during our LGBTQ and A, we thought it was really important to just once again have a moment to have a wee self-reflect on Trans Week, on the Trans Week of Awareness, and also for the Trans Day of Remembrance that is coming up. And we have got a magnificent hot topic tonight from Eleanor, which is well, I would let Eleanor introduce that rather than me stealing your thunder, Eleanor. So go ahead, tell us what is tonight's hot topic.
Thank you very, very much, Alex. So, as you said, in the theme of our Trans Awareness Week, we're going to have a look at a bunch of wonderful trans and non-binary artists and some of the art they create, all from the comfort of your own home. And don't forget, we have all of our past episodes and podcasts available by searching for Shaper Caper on YouTube, Facebook, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, as Alex said. So let's kick it off with a little bit of pottery. Rose Schmitz uses ceramics and pottery to explore her trans identity. This gorgeous quote taken from her site talks about how she uses her work to oppose the traditional blue and white Dutch ceramics that represent a constrictive past. She states, breaking with the traditional designs of the pottery and using the techniques to make pieces that are bodily, phallic, queer, and looking like they're growing tendrils imposes transness onto a traditional past. The tendril-like ceramic vessels stand in for bodies and how they can grow and change in various ways, their shapes evoking organic growth. Some might also recognise her from the show The Great Pottery Throwdown, Channel 4's ceramics answer to Bake Off. Castles is a performance artist, bodybuilder and personal trainer from Montreal, Quebec, now based in Los Angeles. Their work uses the body in a sculptural fashion, integrating feminism, body art, and gay male aesthetics. They also co-led an 80-artist coalition to create In Plain Sight, an artwork dedicated to the abolition of immigrant detention. Over the 4th of July weekend 2020, In Plain Sight launched the nation's sky-typing fleets to spell out artist-generated messages in water vapour, legible for miles. These messages were typed out over the sky, over detention centres and immigration courts, borders and other sites of historic relevance. Moving on, we have Yishe Garbage, who is a Berlin-based trans interdisciplinary artist. Her work has been shown worldwide and is often recognised for her work commenting on bringing visibility to trans women's stories. A particular favourite of mine is Eat Me, Damien, where she preserved her surgically removed testicles. On her website, she describes the piece. I placed a formaldehyde-protected piece of my own body, my testicles, detached during a gender clarification surgery, into a fish tank, by which she also speaks of the objectiveness of sex as well as the embodiment of gender. And she also says, this is part of my body, but I like them best out there. She also creates work in response to discovering her mother was held captive at Birkenau concentration camp during the Holocaust. Moving on, we have someone pretty different. We have Bimini Bon Boulash, who shot to fame through their appearance on RuPaul's Drag Race UK, and they're a non-binary drag performer and author of their best-selling book, Release the Beast. They often mix silliness, playing with gender and topical news into their drag art, and she is a very vocal vegan. They've also modelled at London Fashion Week. Sean Dorsey is a queer choreographer, dancer, writer, and trans rights activist, and is widely recognised as the United States' first acclaimed transgender modern dance choreographer. He's created dance work exploring police brutality against queer people, coming out stories, forgotten trans history, which is particularly important this week, the AIDS epidemic, and the topic of masculinity. Finally, we have Jo Clifford, who was a past guest here on the In Out Crowd and describes herself as a playwright, performer, trans woman, father, and grandma. Having authored over 100 plays, many of which that have been performed internationally, she's been repeatedly awarded for her incredible plays. As a writer-performer, she's best well known for Eve and The Gospel According to Jesus, Queen of Heaven. Eve deeply reflects on her journey as a trans woman, from there and then to here and now, from an oppressive 1950s boyhood to present day. The play celebrates victories of survival and self-realisation against a backdrop of unprecedented societal and political change. The second, The Gospel According to Jesus, Queen of Heaven, was originally met with huge protests, arguing that her play was offensive to Christians and Christianity. But the play is still running and has found great fame, particularly in Brazil, where it acts as a rallying cry for LGBTQ+ rights there. If you want to see the wonderful chat Alex had with Jo, we will link it below in the comments. And of course, there are tons and tons of other trans artists out there, and if you have any suggestions about who we should check out, please do get in touch with us at hello@shaperkeeper.com. And on that note, back to you, Alex.
I've unmuted and muted myself about 6 times there. I was just like, oh my goodness, I remember the conversation we had with Jo. Yes, that is definitely one to have a wee look at if folks haven't managed to catch it just yet. That was in just February there of this year, so it was very recent, and it was great to see all those amazing trans and non-binary artists. Eleanor, thank you so much for putting that wee collection together.
No problem. I discovered some new of my own, and yeah, I'm obsessed with a couple of them. They're really, really cool. Really, really cool people.
There was a section, the first one that you'd mentioned, and it was something like, you know, the transness and like tentacles reaching. I was like, oh my God, I think that might have been my Tinder profile at one point, actually, trans tentacles or something. Need to have a wee look back at that and see what it was so that I can just, give that some credit. Thank you so much, Eleanor. Thank you, Tommy, as well, for all of your fantastic points. And thank you to everyone who was watching, either at home, on the train, in the bath, wherever else you might be. This is, of course, the In Out Crowd, and we will be back very, very shortly with some more podcasts and some more episodes. Thank you to all of the sources that I had a wee look at tonight. You can also check out the BBC LGBT LGBTQ+ news tab, as well as the Guardian LGBTQ+ news tab for more information on these stories I was looking at earlier. And of course, thank you to our funders, such as the Corra Foundation, for helping us continue on with the In Out crowd. But for now...